Today we're going to look at the RGB30 and we're going to see if Powkiddy have managed to up their game when it comes to retro gaming handhelds. I've owned a few Powkiddys in my time and I've reviewed a few on the channel as well, and I have to say I'm not their biggest fan. My issues with Powkiddy are their build quality and their attention to detail. So when I set my eyes on the RGB30 I was kind of excited. I like the look and size of it. I like the little attention to detail on the corners that take hints from the Steam Deck, and the screen looks absolutely amazing. Now the RGB30 competes with the RG353 PS and VS as they share the same power unit, same memory and a lot of other features. It kind of teeters on being budget, but the price of it just slightly pushes it into the medium range. If you want to compare the RGB30 to the 353 series and any other consoles, you can check them out on the Chronic Spartan comparison tool. But what it does mean is that these fit into the same part of the market and compete with each other, with differences coming down to screen and how well the hardware has been implemented. For the price and its target market, I think it achieves its mission in terms of emulation and what it provides to users. But there are some issues which just have me on the fence as to whether I would actually recommend this as a retro gaming handheld over the competition. Starting off, and the most unique thing about the RGB30 is the aspect ratio and style of the console. In dimensions, it's actually closer to a vertical style console, although it positions itself horizontally. And these dimensions paired with this screen are the shining qualities of the RGB30. Further on from that, it has a decent build quality feel as well, taking a step up from some of Powkiddy's previous consoles, which always felt a little bit light and flimsy. The plastic shell is definitely up to the standards of the likes of Anbernic and Retro, although there are some areas for improvement, specifically around the buttons and controls, which you can start to notice just by shaking the device. It gives that rattliness that makes it feel like the console could be a little bit tighter. The buttons, controls and analog sticks themselves when in use feel really good. They have a nice clickiness. The analog joysticks feel great to use, and it gives you all the buttons that you would need for all the games this is going to emulate, including L3 and R3 clickability. But it was when using the controls that I got my first issue, and what I was worried about with this being a Powkiddy device. When first using the console, the R2 button just did not click properly, and to be able to click it I had to press really hard, and even then it would rarely actually activate. It didn't have the clickiness that you expect on the L2 and R2 buttons. And when I opened up the device I could see that the actual button was a bit too far away from the switch itself, which meant whenever you were trying to press it, it wasn't hitting the switch properly. And the only way I could fix it was to put a little bit of duct tape to thicken the membrane where it should touch the switch. It bridged the gap a little bit, and from then on it's worked no problem and I've had no issues. But this is not something we should need to do. You shouldn't have to open up your device to make it work. Now it could just be me, it could have been a one-off, I could have just been unlucky with the device that I got given. But in all the devices that I've used from Anbernic and Retroid, I've never had these issues, and the only time I've ever faced these kinds of issues are on much lower end devices or on Powkiddy devices themselves. But if you're lucky enough to get a device which doesn't have any of these issues, the RGB30 really does start to shine. And as we alluded to at the beginning of the episode, in its portability and in its practicality of being a retro gaming handheld portable console. There's something about the design and shape of it and the smoothness of the entire product that makes it so easy and comfortable to put into your pocket. Of all the devices I've used, I think it's probably the most pocketable one that I've ever used. As I said, portable or landscape consoles tend to be a little bit longer, so protrude out of your pocket a little bit. And vertical consoles these days tend to have those bumps on the back for more grip, which make them slightly less comfortable in your pocket than they could be. Whereas the RGB30 is pretty much flat in all areas and is a size and shape that just fits perfectly in your pocket. Moving on the screen on the RGB30 is the true shining gem of the console. It is a beautiful screen to behold, and the aspect ratio is absolutely perfect for the games that it emulates. Now the RGB30 can emulate up to N64, Dreamcast and PSP. And PSP is where an aspect ratio like this wouldn't work, but in reality N64, PSP and Dreamcast emulation is a little bit jittery on a console like this, and I wouldn't buy the RGB30 if that was my main interest. There's a lot of great gameplay experiences that you can have, and there's a lot of games that do play well, but it is not perfect. For me, the RGB30 is best up until PlayStation 1 games. That's what I use it for, and when playing those types of games on this device, it is near perfection. I've never been one that's really been overly bothered about screen aspect ratios. I'm pretty much okay if I need to have black borders on them, but it wasn't until I used the RGB30 that I truly appreciated the impact of playing those games on a screen like this. The trickiest thing for any retro gaming handheld is to be able to take you back to that generation and almost trick you into thinking and believing that you are playing on the original console. That's the hardest part for any of these consoles to do. Sure, there's the tactile issues of not picking up a cartridge or a disc and actually putting it in the console that take away from that bit of the immersion, but there's also whether the controls feel like they used to or whether the screen looks like it did. And there's something about playing PlayStation 1 games in earlier generations on the RGB30 that just makes it that little bit more enjoyable and that little bit more immersive. And I can't exactly describe what it is, because on paper I wouldn't put the RGB30 above an RG353 or above any of its real competition. But when I want to quickly pick up and play a PlayStation 1 game, it's the RGB30 that keeps on calling to me. And the only thing I can really think of is the aspect ratio and the screen itself. Moving on, and Powkiddy have actually done a great job of the user interface as well. Again, user interfaces are areas that maybe I wasn't that keen on previous Powkiddy consoles. I always felt they came across a lot more budget and cheaper, whereas the user interface on the Powkiddy RGB30 is a lot more like the type you'd see on an Anbernic device, which is great for newcomers and massively easy to use. You can just jump in, you've got all your consoles laid out in front of you, you can select your console, select the game you want to play, and you're up and running. But what I really liked, strangely enough, was the soundtrack they decided to put on the user interface. A selection of some of the best songs from the best retro games over the generations. And it was really nice when in the user interface selecting what game to play and just hearing a game pop up and thinking, oh yeah, that's from Sonic, that's from Mario, and having all these little memories trigger whenever you heard the songs. And in some respects, it was really cool, because when you'd hear one of those songs, it made you think, actually, yeah, I want to play that game. Because that's another issue with retro gaming handhelds. We get so much choice, we're spoiled for choice, it's difficult to think which game to play. And those little soundtrack cues were really nice for absorbing you into the nostalgia, but also giving you little reminders of what games you might want to play. The RGB30 is a fantastic console for anybody looking to relive that nostalgia up into the PlayStation 1. I would like to see Powkiddy do what Anbernic did and provide a slightly more powerful version, but for the price and the immersiveness that this screen brings, the RGB30 is a fantastic choice. But for me personally, I would say beware, as there still may be some build quality issues to look out for. If you want to get your hands on an RGB30, links will be in the description below. And if you want to compare it to all other options out there, you can check out ChronicSpartan.com's comparison tool. But if you're more interested in the equivalent Anbernic device and you want to find out more about it, check out this video right here.